Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
And hello, everybody. Welcome along. It is another edition of the Cricket Badger podcast. I am James, as always, joined by three of the fan badgers. We've not seen them for a while. I've got Phil, Mark, and Ollie with me today, and we're going to go through the world of cricket, Test cricket, men's Test cricket, and we're going to pick our Test 11 current players. There are rules to this. I will just before I introduce them properly, I will show you the sheet we're trying to fill in today. And we need to find two openers. We need to find three other batters in the middle order, an all-rounder, a keeper, a spinner, and three pace bowlers. And the kind of premise behind all of this is it's the perfect Test match track. There's a little bit in it for everybody. So we're basically just picking the best players that we can find to fill our 11. So hello to Phil, hello to Ollie, and hello to Mark. And we might as well, gentlemen, it's good to see you all. It might as well just get straight into this one. And we're going to do this in a rather strange order. And there is method to my madness because there are some players that could fit into two categories. And if they're picked in one, then obviously we can't pick them in the other. And we're going to start off, chaps, with the keepers. There's four potentials on there, but there may be others that you want to discuss as well. But Mohammad Rizwan, Pakistan, Johnny Bairstow of England, Rishabh Pant of India, and Tom Blundell of New Zealand are the four I've put on there. Let's start with you, Phil. I know you've got one of those in your 11. You've all picked your 11s ahead of this, and you've shown me them, so I know what you're going to be looking for. Phil, who was your keeper?
Rishabh Pant was my keeper. He's explosive with the bat, good with the gloves, a match winner, gets in the team and is batting almost on his own, and isn't a liability with the gloves. So my alternative was Quinton de Kock, and I was sort of struggling with him. It was nice to have a left-hander in there as well, because certainly my top order is quite right-handed. So it was, for me, he ticks a lot of boxes. My only concern is that he's a bit, I'd say one-dimensional is probably wrong, but he's sort of got an on and an off switch, isn't he? He's
the other problem with him, Phil, is he's walking on crutches at the moment, isn't he?
Well, I did assume that we were running at full fitness. So, but even on crutches, he'd be better with the bat than me. He'd certainly be quicker than me.
Mark, hello to you. And you're reclined on your hotel bed. Who was your keeper?
Johnny Bairstow, for the simple fact that if you look at his record at number 7 at keeping and batting in a Test match, it's superb over time. If you break down his Test match career, you can see he's had the most success at number 7. I think his keeping is very good. If you look at his ratio of catches to drops, it's actually higher than Ben Foakes, strangely enough. So I don't see any problem with his keeping. I think he can obviously, over the last year or so before his injury, was exceptional cricketer of the year. He can win you a game. So for me, a fit and firing Johnny Bairstow is the best wicket-keeper bat at number 7.
Ollie, hello to you again. And who is your keeper?
Tom Blundell. If I was honest, I was quite close to choosing Rishabh Pant, but obviously his injury, and I felt for the other players I selected, I don't think they would have been ready for that giggle constantly throughout the Test match, which would have been quite annoying for some of them. And actually going through the stats, Blundell's had a good World Test Championship in some areas. He scored some runs against England as well with Darren Mitchell. New Zealand have been in a bit of decline, but he's been one of their positive signs to taking the gloves on and taking more responsibility. He's averaging 43 in Tests at the moment. So and that as a keeper, when you consider that Matt Pryor averaged 40, around that mark. So anything above that for a wicketkeeper, and he's good with the gloves. It made it sort of an easier choice for me. As Phil said as well, I was Quinton de Kock, but he's not playing. I did think about Bairstow, but then I actually see Bairstow's performances better when he wasn't keeping. So some of the ones last summer as well. So yeah, that's what it was. All of those keepers on there are really sort of, and you could choose any of them. But I did think about Rizwan as well, but his record is, I think he's only averaged about 36 in tests, which is disappointing for a man who's actually got such a good white ball record.
Hello to Jonathan Young, who's joined us. He says, "Good evening, fellas. Looking forward to watching this and hearing your selections." And we got a problem in the this opening round of selections because we've all gone for different keepers. As Mark says, Bairstow, Blundell for Ollie, Rishabh Pant for Phil, and mine was Rizwan. I just really like Rizwan. He's a little ball of energy. I just really like watching him as a player. What we're going to do is going to go around the group again, and I'm going to get you to vote on who would be your second choice from the selections that we've picked. So, Phil, of the others, who would you take next? Unmute yourself, Phil.
Won't be the first time that's said today. Yeah, I'd go Rizwan. Quite a similar player in many respects. As I say, that explosive energy. Yeah, definitely Rizwan for me. I don't buy the Johnny Bairstow logic. Look, he does a job for England. I'd personally have folks in the England team. He's not the number one choice for the England team, so I don't see.
I have to say, Phil, I actually considered putting Ben Foakes in my world 11 because I think he is the best keeper in the world.
I thought about it, but we've got when you've got the batting ability and the glove ability of some of the players that have been mentioned, and Johnny Bairstow is not a bad keeper, is it? Quite frankly, so he's it's. I mean, you sport for choice, in truth. But I think if you're going to have that luxury of a batting keeping dynamo, then I'd still stay with Pant, but Rizwan would be my second.
Okay, so second vote for Rizwan. Mark.
Blundell would be my second. I don't think
this is just going to go horribly wrong. We're going to be level.
Well, I think if you look at Rizwan was dropped by Pakistan in the England series. His form has not been. You've frozen, Ollie, I think there. His form
it's frozen in a very good pose, though, isn't he?
Like Basil Brush. Yeah, I think Blundell is an up and coming keeper. He's a very good batsman. So for me, it'd be Blundell, a second choice rather than Rizwan or the other picks.
All right, Ollie, your choice was Blundell. So who are you going to go with as your second pick?
If it's Pan, I would have gone with that. So I would think that it's Pan. When I saw it, I know Rizwan is full of energy, and he does seem to have that sort of that energy about him. He can lift aside. I just don't see him in the same class as the other players runs wise. And every time I've seen him play in tests, I've been a little bit disappointed with him. I know he's scored hundreds, but he's got the ability to do it. If I go for it would be so. I will go.
You're breaking up a bit, Ollie, but we've got your votes. If you could fiddle with your system. My second choice would have been Rishabh Pant. I absolutely adore him as a cricketer. In a similar kind of vein to Rizwan, I think he's worked very hard at his keeping. He's got better with that, and his batting can win matches on his own, like he did do in Australia. So, for me, Rishabh Pant goes in. So that means that Rishabh Pant goes into our 11. So Rishabh Pant is the first choice to go into our Men's World Test 11. We'll move on to our next category then. I'll put Rishabh into our list, and we're going to go with spinner next. We've got one place for a kind of frontline spinner. The nominations on the screen, as you can see, are Ashwin, Ravindra Jadeja, Nathan Lyon, the Aussie, Rashid Khan of Afghanistan, who, albeit hasn't played a lot of Test cricket, is a very, very fine spinner. So let's start with you, Mark, on that one. Your spinner was?
Ashwin. So I think if you look at Ashwin's record, wherever he's played, it's been excellent. The fact that India don't seem to pick him in England is superfluous to me. I think if they had picked him, they'd had a better chance of winning this particular Test match, for example. But I don't think there's anyone who can hold a candle to Ashwin as a match-winning spinner at the moment. He adds with his batting as well. He's got Test hundreds. I mean, someone like Rashid Khan, he's hardly played any first-class cricket, so I couldn't really have him as a spinner. And I think Ashwin's got, I can't remember how many, he's got 450, 460 wickets, maybe more now. Ridiculous amount.
Well,
he can bat and he gets wickets all over the world in all conditions. So I don't think, from my point of view, I don't really think there's a debate. Ashwin is the best spinner in the world. End of.
Is he not on the downward trajectory now? Do you think, Mark?
I don't think so. I don't think he's on the downward trajectory. I mean, India, as I say, don't seem to want to pick him in England because they want Jadeja in the side. But Ashwin's got wickets in Australia. He's got wickets in not in Pakistan because they don't play there. He's got wickets all over the world. So, and obviously in India he cleans up and he can bat and he gets Test match hundreds. So for me, he's the best spinner in the world. And end of for me.
Ollie, your spinner? Ollie, your spinner?
Yeah, it's a mark, but it's Ravi Ashwin.
Okay. Yeah. So Ashwin for you. Phil, your spinner was?
I'll go with Ashwin.
Ollie, I'm gonna have to drop you off this because I can't actually hear you. But I've got your votes. So if you want to try and rejoin, you can do.
Just rejoin, mate.
So I had two of my final choice, and it was either Rashid Khan or Simon Harmer. And I know that neither of them have played many Test matches, but Rashid Khan, as Mark rightly points out, is short of Test match experience, and Simon Harmer is an Essex man and therefore automatically gets into the top two in the world in anybody's book. So in the absence of anybody else, to my mind, and generally, Simon Harmer is such a fantastic competitor and off-spin bowler, and it is influenced by who I've got as my all-rounder as well. So I wanted Simon to turn it into the right-hander and someone else I've got later on to do something else.
Well, you've gone for Simon Harmer, but everybody else has gone for R. Ashwin. So we're going to put R. Ashwin into the side. India, why on earth are you not picking him? Because he is absolute quality. And I just can't get my head around the fact that you haven't actually tried to actually get him into your 11. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Ollie's trying to rejoin the stream. We'll get him back on in just a second. R. Ashwin Ollie has gone into the 11. So he's been picked there as the spinner. Let's go on to the next category then, all-rounder. We're looking for one of these. And Ravindra Jadeja, who was in the spinning category, is also in the all-rounder category as well. You've got Cam Green, Jason Holder, Ben Stokes, Shakib Al Hassan, and plenty of others too. Ollie, let's test your mic and see if you're back clear as well. Who was your all-rounder? I can tell you who Ollie's all-rounder was. Ollie's all-rounder was Cam Green. So he's gone for the Aussie. I am going to go with you next, Phil.
I went for Jadeja and just stellar performances with bat and ball. I considered trying to shoehorn Stokes into the team at this point, but he's not bowling enough. And I think Jason Holder is very unlucky not to get a pick, to be honest, for me, because he's just a match winner every time he plays. But Jadeja, turning it away from the right-hander, exceptional with bat, ball, and in the field. Just a crackerjack player.
I'll come off the back of that because Phil, because I've picked Jadeja as well. I think people see him as a IPL one-day player, hits sixes in that, bowls a few overs a tidy spin kind of thing in the one-day stuff. But his bowling record in Test cricket is absolutely excellent. He's
outstripping everybody.
Yeah, he's a frontline spinner. And also a top, he could probably be picked on his batting alone as well if he was playing for any other country than India. So for me, Jadeja goes in, comfortably qualifies as the all-rounder for me. But Mark, I know you've got a different one.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone for Cam Green for a variety of reasons. I think he offers you good balance in the side. I think Jadeja's record as a spin bowler outside India is pretty average. Used quite a lot as a holding bowler. which is why he gets in front of Ashwin in the UK when they play here. I think Cam Green has a lot of pace. He's got good pace. I think he could play. I think he'll turn himself into a world-class batsman eventually. So if you're going to have Ravi Ashwin in the side, I don't think you need a second spinner in most conditions unless you're playing in India. So for me, Cam Green gets my vote as an up-and-coming young player who I think is going to have a great Ashes.
I agree with you in terms of Cam Green's potential, Mark. I would suggest that maybe he hasn't quite shown enough just yet to warrant selection to the World 11.
Yeah, it's a debate that you can have. That's not an issue. I mean, obviously, he hasn't got a huge amount of wickets. But if you're going to have 4 front gun bowlers, then I think he can certainly act as a fourth seamer with his potential and his batting. And as I say, there's not many places outside of India that Jadeja's actually got wickets anyway. So unless you're playing on turning wickets in India, he's used in more of a holding role. So for me, Cam Green, he hasn't got the stats on the board with his bowling at the moment, but I think with his batting, it's I think you're going to see him have a great series in the Ashes, in my opinion. But obviously, Jadeja's more established than him. But again, it's about balancing a side, isn't it? It's how you balance a side.
It's also about gut feeling, isn't it? And I think we probably all sit here, and I certainly look at Cam Green, and my gut feeling is that the potential in him is so good. The potential is high, and you feel that there's a very decent Ashes in him about to happen. I think perhaps in 6 months' time, the answer to this question might be different for me. But Jadeja at the moment is, for me, with the stats behind him, and just the all-round skill set shades it.
I agree, and seeing as I'm the chairman of the selection panel, we're gonna put Jadeja in as the all-rounder. But I totally agree with what Phil's just said. I think if he did this in about another 6 months' time, the answer might be different. And obviously, for Australia's point of view, if it is different, they're going to have had a very good Ashes, aren't they? Good evening to Nitin. He says, glad with the choice with Ashwin. Hopefully, India's next Test captain until Rishabh Pant is ready. And well, they've got to play him first, Nitin. He's got to get into the 11 before he can captain it, hasn't he? But we'll see how that goes. Anyway, gents, we're going to move on to our next choice, which is we're going to have to select 3 pace bowlers, and there's a few potentials on the screen there. Pat Cummins, Mark Wood, Kahisa Rabada, Shaheen Shah Afridi, Jasprit Bumrah, Jimmy Anderson, Anrik Nortje, Ollie Robinson, Mohammed Shami. We had Stuart Broad was mentioned on the Scott Boland got a mention on Twitter when I stuck it out today. So there's plenty of candidates for this. Ollie, let's come to you and just, with fingers crossed, hopefully we can actually hear you this time.
Can you hear me now, James?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Good man, Ollie. Well done.
That's frustrating. Okay.
Although you've got a delay of about 20 years, I'm gonna have to take you off it, Ollie, because it's spoiling the flow a bit. And I've got your nomination, Ollie. We've got all of Ollie's nominations, and so in the pace department, Ollie has gone with Anrik Nortje, South African, Pat Cummins, the Aussie captain, and Jimmy Anderson. They're his 3 picks. Mine are Shaheen Shah Afridi, Pat Cummins, and Jasprit Bumrah. Phil, you kind of similar vein with you, but you've just gone with a different one in the middle of that. You've gone with Mark Wood.
I have, yeah, Mark Wood. That's sort of a pick from the heart. I think Mark Wood is my favourite cricketer at the moment, with his attitude, the raw aggression when he bowls, his joy at wickets. I just think he'd be fantastic first of all, he's a fantastic bowler. Someone who's going to run in and give it 100% every time. I think it'd be good for the team, just his general attitude towards things. He appears to be a really lovely character as well. There may well be slightly better bowlers, but I don't think you can have a bowler who will have more of an effect on the team, on the performance, and will rush any batsman on the planet, quite frankly, when he's in his pomp.
I have to say, Phil, on the of the podcasts we've done, there've been quite a lot of them now. Mark Wood was one of my favourite guests when he came on. Obviously, current England player, so it was great to get him on. But he surprised me in that he was actually quite not shy, but actually a bit more reserved than I thought. Because you kind of get this gregarious kind of image from a distance, and maybe lovely fella. A very, very good guest on this podcast, so it's a fine nomination. Mark, your 3 nominations in the pace bowling department were Shaheen Shah Afridi, Pat Cummins, and Jasprit Bumrah. So you've actually gone exactly the same as I have, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it's, again, looking at their records, but also balance. So I think Bumrah, when he's fit, is possibly the best pace bowler in the world at the moment. He's just incredibly difficult to face.
That's it, isn't he? He's awkward. He's really awkward. Everything about him is awkward.
Yeah, he gets steepling bounce from a very short run up at 90 miles an hour virtually, and sometimes that bounce can come out of nowhere. So as a batsman, it's incredibly difficult to predict one ball after another with him. I think obviously his record when he's fit, unfortunately he gets a few injuries, is outstanding. I think Pat Cummins obviously speaks for himself in terms of his consistency. I think the other guy, Afridi, he's very quick, and he gives you a left arm option, and I think that's really important. I mean, he's kind of not quite as good as Wasim Akram, but he's Wasim Akram-esque, and if you kind of see his Yorkers and so forth, I think it's unfortunate we haven't seen more of him, because Pakistan are obviously limited in how many tests they play and where they play them, and I think he's only played about 27 tests. He's had a few injuries as well. But I think if you've seen him in the blast for Nottinghamshire, I've seen him in a few games for Nottinghamshire, and see the ball that he got Josh Buttler out with the other night was a sensational delivery, which basically beat Butler completely for pace and plucked his leg stump out the ground. Fantastic Yorker. So, and actually his batting is beginning to improve as well. He gets runs in the IPL, he hits the ball, so he can, he'd obviously had runs at the bottom of the order. So I think for me, and I think, you're talking about balance, you've got a left armer in the side and he's fast. He gets in the side, Bumrah gets in the side when he's fit, and Cummins, you know what you're going to get from him. I think he's an outstanding bowler, and possibly, if he stays fit again, we keep saying that of lots of bowlers, he could go down as one of the all-time greats, Cummins, if he keeps going. So for me, they're my 3.
I'll tell you what, though, there were 3 votes for Shaheen Shah Afridi. Only Ollie didn't want him. He went for Jimmy Anderson, his Lancashire brethren. Pat Cummins got 3 votes as well. Only Phil didn't pick Pat Cummins. And Jasprit Bumrah got 3 votes too. Only Ollie didn't pick Jasprit Bumrah. So considering how many pace bowlers there are out there, Pat Cummins, Jasprit Bumrah and Shaheen Shah Afridi go in almost unchallenged there. 3 very, very good pace bowlers, aren't they, to add to our 11. So far, Jadeja is our all-rounder, Rishabh Pant keeper, Ravi Ashwin is the spin bowler, then Pat Cummins, Jasprit Bumrah and Shaheen Shah Afridi, bringing up the pace department. So it means now, chaps, we go into the next category, which is the batters. Opted to go with the middle order ones first, and because some of these, I know, I've seen a few teams on Twitter, some people try and shoehorn maybe the likes of Joe Root, even Labuschagne into the opener slot, because they can't fit him into the middle order. But Labuschagne, Smith, Root, Babur Azam, and if Babur doesn't get into this 11, I'm fighting you all to the death. Ollie Pope, Virat Kohli, Harry Brook mentioned, Kane Williamson, and Devin Conway has obviously got a very good record for New Zealand, albeit he has played quite a few Test matches actually now. Let's start with you, Phil, on this one, because your nominations in the middle order department were Joe Root, Virat Kohli, and Babur Azam. Good man.
Yeah, it's a really difficult pick, and I've done some shoehorning in other parts of this before for various other reasons. But to be honest, you could argue any of the bats you've mentioned, just trying to pick 3 out of them. I think it's probably harder than the bowlers, to be brutally honest, even though there was sort of a wealth of talent in the bowling as well. Root goes in because I just think he's an exceptional talent and just so consistent and dependable. Azam was my first pick. I have to say, I just find him a supreme talent. and I think he was probably. Yeah, he was certainly the first batsman I picked. And then I had a choice between Smith and Kohli, both probably not the best periods of their careers, but just supreme talents in what they do. So it's you wouldn't go wrong with either one of them, but I sort of plumped for Kohli in the end because I just wanted that bit of arrogance and fight. And I know you get that in every Aussie, but Kohli just has all of that in absolute abundance, and I just felt he needed to be in the team. So Root at 3, Kohli 4, Azam 5 for me.
I mean, you're one of these shoehorners. You put Labuschagne in there as an opener because you couldn't fit him into that middle order.
Well, it was that, but
everybody else apart from Ollie has picked Labuschagne in the middle order. So, he would fit in at 3 probably most. That would be his natural position, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. Look, Labuschagne I want in the team. The biggest problem is I'm not a massive fan of the openers around at the moment. So that was half the issue. But it's also who'd you drop out of the 3 that I had in there. So that was why I did some shoehorning, and also think Labuschagne, he's a really obstinate character. He's got all the elements I'd want in an opener anyway. So yeah. I think he was best suited to being shoehorned, and I need a bit of fight in my team, which had a lot of the sort of flair running around. Might not necessarily be able to grind stuff out. So Labuschagne does get in, but
what I'm going to suggest, Phil, on the basis you voted for him, but as an opener, that we put him in at 3, because there's 3 out of the 4 of us want him in the 11, and Babar Azam has got a vote from everybody. So Babar Azam goes in at 5. So it means we're left with an argument now, Mark, about who should be our number 4.
I strangely had Babar Azam as an opener because of what Phil was saying about the issues with openers around, and Babar has actually.
They're your picks, aren't they? Let's have a look.
Yeah,
you.
And Babar has actually opened the batting for Pakistan in Test matches.
Yeah.
So there is an advantage there. But I think for me, I wouldn't have Kohli in the side because I think when we talk about the downside, if you look at Kohli's record over the last 2 years or just over 2 years, it's been mediocre. So for me, Steve Smith has to play in the side with Joe Root. So Steve Smith would get my vote.
Would you pick Steve Smith over Joe Root? Because it seems to me that at number 4, that is the question we've got to ask ourselves. Because my 3, 4, and 5 was Labuschagne, Smith, and Azam, and very unlike me, I haven't actually been able to get Joe Root in there because Labuschagne for me is probably as good as it gets in.
I would have Steve Smith over Joe Root, and I think the reason for that.
Where's James Vince?
James Vince is a squad player.
Well, he's in the hotel down the road in Southport at the moment. But,
James Vince has got to be in the squad. He comes along as a mascot at the very least.
Right. I'd take Steve Smith over Joe Root because I think Steve Smith. Smith's a better player than Joe Root essentially, and he makes. You probably kind of contradict me on this, but when he makes centres, he makes very big centres. And I think one of the issues with Joe Root is not so much in the last 12 months, but his conversion rate has not been. If you look at his conversion rate, if you say is Joe Root going to be one of the best players of all time, then you look at it, he's got to have a better conversion rate than he has at the moment. I think Steve Smith has a conversion rate of something like 1.1 century in every 6.5 innings. And I think Roots is more like 1 in 8, 1 in 9.
Yeah.
So Steve Smith is in that elite category, which includes players like Brian Lara, for example, in that particular category. And you need so for me, it's a no-brainer. Steve Smith has to be in the side.
I agree. I can't believe that I'm going to publish a World 11 without Rooty in it because I absolutely love him to bits. But he doesn't he'd be in the squad. Him and James Vince go as the spare batters. It's going to have to be Stephen Smith that goes in there at number 4, I think. So we have picked our middle order, chaps. The only thing that's left for us now is to pick our openers, and this is the tough task for world batters at the moment, isn't it? Who openers are actually showing something. I've got a few suggestions on here. Tom Latham, New Zealander. Devon Conway's he's opened as well as being at number 3. Usman Khawaja, the Aussie. Ben Duckett doing well for England at the moment. Karunaratne, Sri Lanka. Rohit Sharma of India. Imam ul Haq of Pakistan, and Craig Brathwaite of West Indies. I'm going to start on this, and I'll tell you who my selections were for the opener slot. And it wasn't Zach Crawley. It might surprise you to know. But I've gone for Ozzy Khawaja. I think he is just right up there at the moment. He's recently in Test cricket, he's just cracked it. And I think we're going to see a big Ashes from him. He's going to be one of the key wickets at the top of the order for the English bowlers anyway. And my other one was to open with him is Ben Duckett, who has been promoted by England and has had 2 incarnations in Test cricket. The first one was very, very tough indeed, away in Bangladesh and away in India, and he didn't cut the mustard. But since he's been recalled in the Bazball era, Ben Duckett has been absolutely exceptional. He's averaging 60 or 70, I think, in that period in Test cricket. So that's very much a form pick for me, Ben Duckett to open the top of the innings. I really like him. I hope he has a good Ashes and he keeps that place. So my 2 picks were Ben Duckett and Ozzy Khawaja. Phil, yours were Karunaratne, Sri Lanka, and Labuschagne. Obviously, we've already picked Labuschagne elsewhere. Argue the case for Karunaratne to be in there.
He's a grinder and a fighter, and I do like a grinder. And contrary to form, I've picked a lot of flashes in the team that are going to. That need someone to keep them honest.
Going to be Phil Ball. Is this where?
Yeah, Phil Ball. So, but just lefty, great results. It's great performances, and I think decent stats for a player in a weak team. And I don't think in terms of the market for openers at the minute, they're in a classical period. So he wouldn't be getting into any all-time great 11s. But in terms of what's there at the moment, as well as being a left-hand, I do like a left-right hand combination as well. Certainly for openers to test that line, test the lines that the seam is going to be bowling. So for me, I think just work rate and attitude get him in there. But I still think in terms of Khawaja, I thought about Khawaja as well. But you've got a choice between promoting somebody like Azam. I'd happily open with him or Labuschagne. That's what drove me essentially to that choice, because I think the others are, they're all perfectly decent players. But if you've got someone sitting, so we've got Joe Root sitting, carrying the drinks, whilst Khawaja's going out and opening, you think, well, you've got to find a way of, and that's why I would have Labuschagne go in so Root could slip into that middle order.
Okay, you've gone for Karunaratne as well, Mark. We've obviously already picked your other choice, so in the middle order. So Karunaratne goes in, and I think actually the way the votes have come in for this pick, it is Khawaja and Karunaratne that are going to be at the top of the order. Would you be happy with that, Mark?
I'd be happy with the Sri Lankan guy at the top of the order. I think Khawaja is an interesting one. I know he's had a very good time of it recently, but his record in England, actually, he's played for 2 counties, I think, and it's been pretty average. So I'm going to be interested to see how he kind of cuts it in English conditions this summer, although the pitches are going to be slightly different. They're going to be flatter. As for Ben Duckett, he has surprised me, and he seems a lot more application about it these days than when he first started. I think he did an interview, I think with the Guardian, was it, or the Times over the weekend, talking about how he's matured a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see, because he doesn't leave many balls alone. So it'll be just very interesting to see how he goes on against the likes of Boland and Cummings, et al., because he's not a great lever of the ball. If you look at his stats, he plays at virtually every single ball he faces, one way or another. So that'll be interesting to see if he can come off. He can come off great. I mean, that's the whole kind of great kind of situation we're in with these Ashes, isn't it? Because there's so many unknowns in terms of whether England's
It's going to be a brilliant
will
series, Mark, isn't it? Because I think Bazball against the Australian pace attack, someone tested, Ashes virgins, for want of a better phrase, in the likes of Duckett and what have you.
It's really exciting. I think it's an exciting test series. I mean, I think actually having the 5 games in 6 or 7 weeks actually makes it even more exciting in some respects because you've got it in that condensed period. And I say, I mean, obviously England have transformed themselves over the last 12 months, but this series and the series in India are now going to be the acid tests. And so we will see. I mean, if it comes off, then you can say that Ben Stokes has surpassed Mike Brearley as a captain. So it's going to be really exciting.
Did you see my tweet, gents, earlier, where I'd missed the interview that Ben Stokes had done with Nasser Hussain at the end of the previous Test match? And Lucas, who's often on the podcast, sent me the quotes across to me. Because what Ben Stokes is basically, he's literally living by the sword, dying by the sword, isn't he? They've made this, this philosophy that they're going to attack wherever possible. They're going to choose the attacking option. If there's a dilemma, they're going to attack rather than defend. And the Nasser asked him at the end of the previous Test match. I'll read it out. Nasser's question was, what about having someone in your team who could be a top player but wants to do it a bit differently? Say you have a young Alistair Cook, Mike Atherton, or Jonathan Trott who wants to bat the old-fashioned way and grind out a big score. Is there room for a person like that? And Ben Stokes' reply was, there are players who have played a certain way in their whole careers, and that's them. That's fine. I'm not saying that's not the way to play, but in this day and age, and while I'm captain and Baz's coach, that is not something we're looking for. We want players who will go out there and put pressure on the bowlers straight away. Look at Harry Brook and how he's taken the world by storm. And he's not really looked like he's got out of fourth gear, to be honest. Those are the type of players that are going to be noticed while we are in charge. So what he's effectively said there is that they will continue to pick the Zach Crawleys of this world and the guys that are a little bit more attacking and have a potential to go along at a very decent strike rate above an Alistair Cook. If there was a young Alistair Cook out there at the moment, Mark, he wouldn't actually make this England team.
Well, I have no issue with Stokes saying that because, he's the captain, he got a coach and they have a philosophy. And it's better to have a philosophy that you believe in rather than chopping and changing every 5 minutes, which England historically, certainly before central contracts, used to do. So I have no issue with Stokes' philosophy and what he's looking for because every captain needs to go out with the team that he wants or they want. So I've got no issue with that. But what I would say is that, when you were talking about quality of bowlers, England are going to have the acid test in the next 2 series. We talked at the beginning of the podcast about New Zealand in last year being slightly unlucky against England, and it could have gone all pear-shaped. England don't really have a plan B. If they possibly need a plan B. And the other thing I would say about when he talks about the likes of Cork, Atherton, these types of players, some of the bowlers in those previous eras were some of the greatest bowlers of all time: Murali, Donald, Warne, McGrath. The list could go on and on from the.
Well, just remember Atherton against Donald at Trent Bridge. That was fantastic.
So I'd like to see how the England team would go against Alan Donald or Glenn McGrath doing Bazball. So this to me is the acid test. If it comes off, then great. Ben Stokes is the best captain England have ever had. He's transformed the way they play, etc., etc. But I do have serious doubts whether it will translate into this series and against India. I think the sides that England have played, Test cricket is not as strong as it was 25 years ago generally. We know that. I think the sides that England have played, in Pakistan, they did great to win 3-0. England only ever won 2 test matches in Pakistan, but they played against a mediocre Pakistan side, it has to be said. New Zealand last year, I just feel that these are the big sides now, and England have to show that they can translate this philosophy. If they're 50 for 5 and Pat Cummins is roaring in, are they going to still keep going for it with a long tail?
They said they're going to, haven't they? They said they're going to actually.
They will. They'll have to, but they could easily be 120 all out, and the Test match could be over in 3 days. And if you go 2-0 down, then you've got questions to ask. And then you've got India in February, 4 test matches. You haven't got a spin bowler. So these next 9 test matches will define Ben Stokes' captaincy.
The one thing about Bazball, Phil, regardless of whether you think it's going to work against Australia or not, it certainly makes this series absolutely fascinating. It's going to be box office from start to finish, isn't it? But just going back to the question I asked Mark, you're an Essex fan. Would you take Zach Crawley over Alistair Cook?
No. You know, no. It's Mark is spot on. There is no plan B, and normally plan B is when surely is saving a test match. Obviously, it's fantastic, breath of fresh air watching England try and smash their way to victories, but we have been equal to or outpowering the teams that we've played so far. You go to New Zealand, you think we probably have more firepower than them. We're both bat and ball generally. We are not in that position. We don't have that luxury against Australia and India. And the idea you're just going to go and bully them straight off the pitch, I mean, I'd love it to work, but my instinct is it's going to take a bit more of the Alistair Cook than the Zach Crawley approach for these test matches. And I think to rule it out is, I suspect, well, not an error. I mean, Mark's right. You've got a philosophy. You want to stand and deliver or die on that hill. But for my part, I'd love to have the option. I think you want a mixture in that team, don't you? You want someone who can come in and fight for you. So,
I mean, the two that he said he wouldn't select, Jonathan Trott and Alistair Cook, are two of the, in recent times, two of England's most successful batters, aren't they? It seems a bit bonkers to me that just to dismiss them out of hand.
You just look at the standard of bowlers that we've had to pick from today.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in. I think we're in a really good age for bowling at the moment. I mean, Mark mentioned there being a great age before. I think we might reflect on this age, this sort of period, and think there are some top.
I think there is some very good bowlers at the moment, but I mean, even the bowlers we've spoken about, I'm not sure if they're as if they're in the Wasim Akram when in his pomp, Wacky Eunice, Glenn McGrath, Alan Donald, could go on and on. I'm not quite sure they are of that ilk. I think the consistent bowlers, the game's changed as well. Obviously, a lot of them, have played white ball cricket and so forth. But I think it's, I think Australia will win the series. Personally, I think they're a better side than England, so I think that will show in the end. But I think Stokes done a great job. If you think where England was where 12 months ago,
I was going to ask you that, Mark, because I was a little bit sceptical of Ben Stokes, I must admit, when he was first muted and then appointed as England captain. I was thinking this maybe isn't the best choice. He's really surprised me. I think he's absolutely, tactically, he knows exactly what he wants from his team. He's ultra aggressive. It's working for him. His record so far is absolutely superb. The one thing with him is that what you've said is that he's got that identity. The team has got an identity. Whether you think it's going to work or not against Australia, we know exactly how they're going to play. We know what Ben Stokes' team does. I always thought with Rooty, and I know Rooty a little bit from my time at Yorkshire, that he never really imposed his own identity on his England team when he was captain. We all know this is Ben Stokes' team.
Of course we do. And I mean, to a certain degree, he had nothing to lose, did he? Come in when England was at a really low ebb, new coach, new philosopher. He had a kind of blank canvas with Rob Key coming in as well. And so he's had a real, just a free run at it. And, he has surprised me in his leadership. His leadership ability, his ability to get people on his side and back them. And I think that's real. I think that's important in any leadership role, that you make people feel comfortable in themselves and go out and express themselves. And I think it's great that he's done that. And obviously that wasn't happening in the previous regime. I don't think Root was the greatest of captains. I've said that before. But I think McCullum and Stokes have developed a good chemistry between them. And we will see, won't we? I mean, even if Stokes fails, even if England don't win this test series and don't win in India, that doesn't detract from the work that Stokes has done in re-energising the England test team. Because now there are people who want to play red ball cricket. There's an interest in it. There's lots of young players coming through. We haven't got any spinners, obviously. We've gone back to Mo Ali, but that's to do with the way we schedule our cricket. But I don't think it should detract from the job he's done, even if England lose, because I think he's done a fantastic job overall, and that's what matters.
Been really impressed with Brendan McCullum. I saw his interview with Sky over the last Test match, and he reminds me a lot of when I was working at Yorkshire. Jason Gillespie came in, and Dizzy's very simple. Just go out there, enjoy it. Be your own best selector. It's a simple game at the end of the day, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate it, Phil. And the Brendan McCullum has got that very refreshing approach as well. He just wants them to go out there and enjoy it, and be there. And if they fail once, pat on the back, go out there and do it better next time. It's kind of just keep it simple.
Yeah, I think if you're playing for him, then you love it. I mean, there are players who under previous regimes wouldn't have got 3 tests that are in there now. 20 tests in, I think, and there's no way that they can't feel supported in what they're doing, because it's that right or wrong, rightly or wrongly, the players are in there know that the management support them. That can only be beneficial to their game. So, and if the approach is go out there, we're going to publicly back you, and we're going to privately back you, and just have your go. Well, you sort of absolve the players of responsibility in many respects, and I'd imagine that's completely refreshing, and must have. There has been a clear improvement, as Mark says. So, it's. I think it's probably a good place to be playing your cricket at the moment. Whether it's the best way to get results against Australia and India is another matter, but
we'll find out, won't we? We'll find out over the next few months and the next few weeks against Australia, because it's going to be. I'm looking forward to this Ashes series as much as I look forward to one for a long time. I think sometimes in cricket we kind of big up the Ashes, and it's almost a bit disrespectful to some of the other series that we play. We've had some great series against New Zealand. We've had some fantastic series against India. But this Ashes series has really lit my fire. I cannot wait for it. But anyway, back to where we started, back to our World 11. And the final one is going to appear on screen by the magic of my fingers. Hey, we have I knew I was going to get that wrong. Karuna Ratne, the Sri Lankan, opening with Usman Khawaja of Australia. In fact, it's a very Australian top-heavy batting lineup with Monas Labuschagne and Steve Smith following in the batting order. Then Babar Azam coming in at number 5. Jadeja, Pant and Ashwin, the Indian trio, are there in the lower middle order as spinners, keepers and all-rounders respectively. And then the 3 pacemen that we picked today: Pat Cummins of Australia, Jasprit Bumrah of India, and Shaheen Shah Afridi of Pakistan. There is variety there. There is pretty much all bases covered, I think. I actually really like that team that we've ended up on there. Who's going to be our captain, though, Mark?
Oh, who's going to be the captain? That's an interesting question.
I'll leave it on the screen while you think about it, because there's the choices are on there. I mean, obviously, Pat Cummins is a current incumbent for Australia.
I think I would give it to Pat Cummins, because actually I think he's proven himself to be he's a really quite a rounded character, Cummins, I think. And I think he's proved himself that in his leadership role with Australia. He's quite level-headed, grounded, slightly different than Stokes in some respects, but I'd go with him as a captain. I think he's done well enough for Australia.
What about you, Phil?
Yeah, I think I'd come with Cummins as well. Actually, I can't think of anything that I would criticise or too much in his captaincy I'd criticise so far. Very level-headed. You know what you're going to get with him with the ball. I was always suspicious of bowlers as captains, but I've sort of come around to the idea of it now, insofar as obviously they know you tend to think it distracts from their own game in terms of bowling, but I've seen no evidence of him having his not bowling himself when he should, or perhaps reducing his own workload to accommodate others. So I think he's a very safe pair of hands for that.
Thanks. I mean, Steve Smith would be the other obvious alternative, but Australia seem to have got it cracked. I agree with everything you've just said about Pat Cummins. I mean, there's no real obvious reason why a bowler shouldn't be captain, apart from the fact they need to manage their own spells. But what Australia do, Mark, is when Pat Cummins comes on, effectively Steve Smith takes over the reins and marshals the field, works with Pat Cummins and takes the kind of pressure off him a little bit so he can concentrate on his bowling. Seems to work very well for them.
Yeah, the only thing going back to that 11, I would say, Depends where you play, doesn't it? Would you want to play two spinners in England? I don't know. That's why I went for Cam Green as the all-rounder. Maybe if you're playing on the subcontinent, you might have two spinners, but I'm not sure you'd have two spinners and only three seamers. There's not even a backup seamer in the first five, is there? I'm just not criticising. I'm just kind of making the case.
I think if we take our squad, we've agreed that Joe Root and James Vince go, and probably Zach Crawley as well. But tonight, and then we've got we probably have a reserve keeper, and then which would probably be Rizwan from our discussions. And then the reserve pace bowler and the reserve spinners, etc., would probably cover the any
other bases, and
the other bases that we have. I mean, the squad of 16 would be rather special, wouldn't it? I mean, some of the players we didn't even mention in the discussions today. Ollie Robinson, I think he's going to have a big Ashes, and he's kind of certainly building himself up to be Jimmy's replacement when Jimmy finally does hang up his boots. Plenty of. Scott Boland we did talk about, but plenty of other people that we didn't get, and we didn't even really seriously consider Ben Stokes going in the team.
Well, that's because we talked about Ben's leadership, but as a player, one thing he has done a little bit, he's not really as a batsman. When we talk about Bazball, he's taken it to the extreme. He sold himself short in the last year. And he's not bowling, so I'm not sure you could have him in the side as an all-rounder at the moment.
Well, gentlemen, that concludes our podcast for the day. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks to Ollie. If you're still watching, Ollie, thank you very much for trying. But we had to bin you off because it was dreadful, wasn't it? It was Ollie's idea as well, so it's a shame we couldn't actually see it through. But Phil and Mark, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll see you again as we go through this Ashes summer.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you.
And thank you very much out there, everybody, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you along. We'll be back with more Cricket Badger podcasts very soon indeed. And I am just trying to find something that I can put on the screen. Where has it gone? There we go. We'll put this on and we'll see you again very soon indeed. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.